our costs and bad debts divided by the number of jobs. All our overheads, and includes interest paid back on loans. So, of course, on top of that, the person has borrowed money. So you don't set up a business for £2 grand, but that's the cost per job of all the process of what we are actually doing. You also mentioned about 25k limit, which is the limit set down in the statutory instrument. Where do people go after that? Thankfully, this year, a change we've achieved is a person can now come back to us a second time. Up to earlier this year, the logic was a person gets a loan from Microfinance Ireland. They should be bankable after that. As the loans will begin to mature, the reality is they're not. They're sustaining themselves, they're employing people, but they're still very, very, very weak businesses. So thankfully we've been allowed to do repeat business with our existing customer base. You asked about our loan rates. Our standard rate is a 7.8% fixed APR, and for our partners, referrals through the banks, LEOs and LDCs, there's a 1% discount, so 6.8%. You asked about the default rate. Our default rate is 30% all in. We've only written off 16% so far, but the default rate is actually 30%, which I think is actually is the mandate we've been given, and is probably as aggressive as you might well like it to be. But that's probably a debate for another day.
But I was in favour of a reasonable failure rate.
Yeah, and I think that is a reasonable level. I mean, if we were
no, I accept that as reasonable.
Yeah. And very interesting question about promoter and propose and the proposition. This is all about the promoter. We have 30 odd loan assessors around the country. They will meet the loan applicants. It is all about meeting the person, whether he or she has the wherewithal to actually create the business. If they don't have it, the proposition will never work. This is all about the promoter.
And you're allowed to use that.
Pardon?
You're allowed to make a personal judgment.
Oh yeah, I mean it's essential. You couldn't assess this very small stuff you could assess on paper, but you know, and I'm talking about the 1 and 2, that's 2 or 5,000s, but at the 25,000 level or 20 to 25 or any figure, but you know, you need to eyeball the person. Yeah. You need to understand it.
Thanks very much, Mr. Stokes. We're under time pressure. We have to be out. Hold on a second now, Deputy. We have to be out of the room by 1:15, right? So there's a number of questions there.
Just one very quickly.
From really three. Quickly. So just to be brief and to give everyone an opportunity to come back in.
But just at the 6-7%, it always. Well, I was very surprised I had to change the car. And a certain company I won't mention were able to give a loan at a hell of a lot lower rate than that for car finance because they were borrowing it EU money. Yeah. You'll see them advertised. Sorry, because 6% to 3%, it's all the difference in your borrowing.
We'll talk about the bailout of 10 years ago and what caused all of this in the first place.
Listen, we need to get through this now.
Don't be so sensitive.
Mr. Stokes is answering the questions there, and we'd like to move on maybe to the other organisations, given the time constraint as well. So, thanks very much. Will you take ICOS?
Yes. Well, I'd like to thank Deputy Coffey for the endorsement, and I suppose just on the competition for funding, I suppose there across the areas we are, and across the areas that the colleague organisations are there, it probably is inevitable, but nothing that we've found a major choke point or anything like that, and it could even be outweighed by opportunities to dovetail at the risk of jumping to any kind of conclusion or speaking for the other organisations.
Thanks very much. Pobble?
Thanks very much. I suppose in relation to the issue raised around communication, and both Senator Hopkins and Senator Coffey raised it, it's something that we've put a lot of effort actually into over the last year to 2 years, and especially in revising the website. We have a lot of online tools. There are a lot of infographics. They're easy to see infographics in relation to each of the programmes. We've been engaged in a number of regional workshops. For example, that involved in the ploughing, things like the ploughing championships, getting word out there in terms of the programmes, so that where people are engaging with them around the various programmes. But I think there's a lot more we can do, because there's a lot. Taking your point, there are a lot of programmes out there. There are a lot of initiatives that are there to support people in rural Ireland, and it's about letting them know about it. And one example is the Senior Alert Scheme, because there was an underspend in that. I think about a year ago, a number of you would have raised it yourselves. So there was significant effort put into communicating that, and that has significantly increased in terms of the people that are engaging with us. There's been a massive increase in those numbers, to the extent that we're chasing to try and keep up with the demand. But that's a good piece, and it just shows when the communication is right, it can deliver it. In relation to Deputy O'Keefe, you raised a number of points in relation to the form filling and and I think we've had conversations in the past about the essay competitions that might be perceived in terms of some of the forms that would have to be completed. We're constantly revising the forms that people have to complete. We're restricted to some extent because there are certain data that we have to collect in relation to the forms that are being completed. Also, I'd like to think that anybody that submits some application to us, that they get direct feedback. I mean, I know that they get, immediately if someone's rejected, they get direct feedback by letter or through phone feedback in terms of the areas that they could improve on, or the areas they need to improve on in the future. And indeed, through our help desk and client services desk, there's help and resources available to people to submit for a new round when that becomes available. In relation to the regionalisation piece and Clifton, as you mentioned, Deputy, we have a very strong office in Clifton with up to 40 staff there, and just under 50% of all our staff are based across the regions. We have now 12 offices across the country, and the point's well made. Because we're expanding with new programmes, and especially through the early years piece, we've in our new strategic plan we've stated from 2018 to 2021 we're going to make every effort to, if there's any further expansion, to do it regionally, because of the very piece in terms of costs that relate to Dublin, and also because the technology is now a lot easier to do your business on a regional basis. So we have every intention of carrying that out over the next couple of years. In relation to the community services programme and the point in relation to the minimum wage, that is ultimately a decision, of course, by the department. But there is a support fund that organisations can apply for if they're in particular straits, which some organisations would be, to have extra subvention to support them to pay the minimum wage. And you will be aware that the Minister intends to have a review of CSP, and that will be one of the issues that will be reviewed very much under that. And I just turn to my colleague Paul Skinner in relation to the toolkit, just to maybe give some detail on that for Senator Hopkins. Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Chairperson. The Managing Better series is a series that we've had for a number of years, which is a toolkit that seeks to provide information on human resources, on corporate governance, on financial management. So this year we've revised, because of the changed landscape, we've revised that, and that's now available to all our organisations on our website. And in addition to that, we do, for example, in the Community Services Programme, we are going to be running workshops in the next number of weeks, and again, we'll be making reference to that toolkit.
Thank you very much. Ms Fitzsimons?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, if you don't mind, Chairman. Acorns isn't an agency. Acorns is a programme. And, of course, the policy puts the spotlight on the gender issue, if you like, and the tender was put out, which we won. No, I'm not an organisation. I'm in the private sector, so I run a consultancy company. But I'm not an organisation in the public sector. So I just wouldn't want to.
I know, but technically speaking, neither is Public.
No, I'm not part of Public at all.
No, I'm saying Public is not a state agency.
Sorry, apologise.
It's actually an organisation in the private sector, technically.
Sure. Well, I apologise if I misunderstood you, but I didn't want, because one of the things in our terms and conditions that we sign is that we're never to put ourselves forward that we're employed by. So that's the only reason I wanted to clarify that. And I think one of the reasons that Acorns has been successful in what it does, it's about entrepreneurs supporting entrepreneurs. So it's volunteers who want to give back their time of having been a successful development of business, helping others also to be successful.
Thanks very much. We're under time constraints, so I'm going to call the meeting to a close. I want to thank all Acorns and wish you well in November in that competition that you're involved in, down to the last three. Hopefully you come up number one and fly that flag. You have a very inspiring story, and it's wonderful what you've done engaging with entrepreneurs, women in particular, to try and improve their chances of being successful within the business environment. Microfinance, I want to wish you well, and you are engaging throughout the country. I want to wish you well. ICOS, again, wonderful organisation throughout the country as well, and I wish you well too. And Pobal, thanks very much for your engagement. You're always available to this committee. Thanks again, and I wish you well. So the Joint Committee is adjourned until 10:30 on Wednesday, the 17th of October 2018.
Moscow, tucked the dog agus Shanador Sonorov, Mars Federlin, Dulastock, a Crinua Husnu, a session Pibli. Tommy, a session Pibli? Well, on Warfod. A Corlium, Hord Colty, Angohan, Foca, a Vuku, Unas, not Gurren, Eshes Jacker, Angoras, Fulma, Agus Chrelachon, on Crinaha. So I might ask you to switch off your phones, please. Now, we have obviously to discuss the estimates of the year, but we might go into, I think, private session to discuss some internal housekeeping business. Is that agreed? You.
Okay.
Inniu déimiid play leis an ara cultúr Oireachta agus Gaeltacht module Vóta Meastachán Truchas a Trí Cultúr Oireacht agus Gaeltacht Aprú Lord Bliana Gábílas a Hochtaig. Bhfuilm just míle buchas agus fáilte chur rumpú inniu as teachtas teach an seo, fair play. Agus mar ó díobh se caithmid tosnú leis an na rudí dlíthúil ar dús. So before I ask you to address the meeting, I wish to draw your attention to the fact that by virtue of Section 17(2)(l) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect to their evidence to the committee. However, if you're directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter, and you continue to do so, you're entitled thereafter only to qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected to the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you're asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person, persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. I also wish to advise you that the opening statement and any other documents you have submitted to the committee may be published on the committee website after this meeting. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the Houses or an official either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. Okay, Contus a dhéanamh don chórá, tugamid cura inis don ara Josepha Madigan, a cura láthir a dhéanamh le the Hull.
Kamagat, and thank you for the invitation today. As Minister for Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht, I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to address the committee in relation to the performance, expenditure and targets of my department during the first half of 2018. And it's been a very significant year for my department with the launch of Project Ireland 2040, which, as we know, is a comprehensive national planning framework and associated 10-year national development plan. It explicitly recognises that our culture, our language and our heritage are essential parts of the sustainable development of the country and acknowledges the centrality of culture and creativity to our national development. And for my part, Project Ireland 2040 has afforded my department an unprecedented opportunity to invest over €1 billion in our cultural, linguistic and heritage infrastructure to safeguard and future-proof this precious resource for generations to come. Of this investment, some €725 million will be invested directly into our cultural infrastructure, in our creative industries and in enhancing cultural experience for our citizens. An investment programme of €285 million over the period of the plan emphasises the amenity value of our natural and built heritage, and a further €178 million is being provided to support and protect the Irish language, Gaeltacht communities and communities on our offshore islands, and this is particularly fitting in 2018 as we celebrate Blian na Gaeilge. And in April of this year I was delighted that the Taoiseach and the Minister for Finance and Public Expenditure and Reform could join me in launching our historic capital investment plan for my department on foot of Project Ireland 2040. The level of investment proposed will transform our cultural and heritage infrastructure right across the country and represents an important statement for this generation and future generations. And as Minister for Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht, I look forward to implementing this programme of investment and seeing stakeholders and citizens alike reaping the rewards of this investment in the years ahead. In terms of my appearance here today, the members have been provided with a report by my department outlining details of performance and expenditure across all programme areas during the first half of 2018. And the 2018 revised estimates provides for a gross allocation of just under €303 million for my department, and in addition a further €700,000 in capital funding was carried over from the 2017 provision. So gross total expenditure incurred by my department in the period to the 30th of June 2018 was €143.5 million. This expenditure represents 47% of the overall 2018 gross allocation. And my colleague, Government Chief Whip and Minister of State, Joe McHugh, and I will now speak about the highlights of each programme area during the first half of the year. I will commence with the culture programme, and I'm happy to expand later on any matter that the members may wish to raise. So in relation to culture, the funding of €167.3 million is provided in 2018 for the culture programme. The total gross expenditure for Programme A up to the 30th of June was just under 85 million, representing 51% of the 2018 programme allocation. A cornerstone of my department's cultural investment programme under the NDP is the 460 million that is being set aside for the renovation of the national cultural institutions, the protection of the national collections and the enhancement of visitor experiences and services. This funding programme will build on the success of the renovation of the Milltown and Dargan wings of the National Gallery and will include significant capital investments across many of our institutions. This is a critical year for the appraisal, planning and design of these flagship projects, with a view to moving to the implementation phase in the following years. And we have made progress on a number of key projects, including the redevelopment of the National Library and the renovation of the National Archives. And we're also moving other projects through the appraisal and evaluation stages, including the Natural History Museum and the Crawford Gallery in Cork. And under a new and culture and creativity programme, an investment of 265 million will also be made in enhancing regional cultural infrastructure to ensure that people in all parts of Ireland enjoy opportunities to engage with the arts and culture, in the digitisation of the national collections to ensure they are preserved and made available to a global audience, and in the expansion of the audiovisual sector as a key element of the government's creative industries investment. In June of this year, my department launched a major new strategy on the audiovisual industry, which will guide the 200 million Project Ireland investment in expanding that vital creative industry. The Creative Ireland programme goes from strength to strength and continues to enable increased creativity and access to cultural activity across our communities. The funding provided for the programme has meant huge progress made under Pillar 1, which is Creative Youth. And working in partnership with my colleague, Minister Bruton, and the Arts Council, we launched Creative Schools in March 2018. 10% of all schools in the country applied for the pilot. 150 schools were chosen from 400 applications. Over 38,000 students will have access to this initiative during this year and into next year, which will explore the potential impact of the arts and creativity on school life. Funding provided for our local authority culture teams from my department and the Department of Housing have led to the development of ambitious and challenging 5-year culture and creativity strategies for each local authority, and all 31 of those were launched by myself, the Taoiseach and my colleague Minister Murphy last week. With the additional funding provided this year, local authorities have risen to the challenge of rolling out the Creative Ireland programme in communities all over Ireland and have already doubled the initiatives to over 500, with more expected by year end. Cuinnú na nÓg was the first National Day celebrating children and young people's creativity in June. I think it was the 23rd of June, and this was a great success. Funding provided allowed local authorities to hold over 500 events and initiatives across the country free of charge. Events range from photography to theatre and drama to coding, and our culture teams in the local authorities showed imagination and innovation in their approach. In May of this year, I launched the Creative Ireland programme scheme, seeking new partnerships across the various creative activities, and there was huge interest, and I'll be making a formal announcement in the coming weeks of up to 30 new partnerships focusing on creative industries, the environment, film and media, heritage, music, theatre and drama, visual arts, and of course mental health. And I look forward to feeding the learning from these new partnerships into wider government policy, making the Creative Ireland programme a real cross-government initiative. 2018 also sees the presentation of Culture Ireland GB18, which is a special year-long programme to celebrate and renew the unique cultural relationship which exists between Ireland and Great Britain, and over 100 Irish artists are touring England, Scotland and Wales in celebration of this unique cultural connection, as well as forging new connections, which it is hoped will be further developed in future years, ensuring our close cultural bonds for the future. Finally, in terms of the culture programme, it would be remiss of me not to mention the new Cultural and Heritage Centre at the Bank of Ireland in College Green, which opens its doors to the public in July of this year. And Bank of Ireland has very generously made the space available for the centre to the state for a 10-year period, during which time my department will manage and animate the space. The first exhibition in the centre is Listen Now Again, an exhibition exploring the life and works of Nobel Prize-winning poet Seamus Heaney, which is being run and curated by the National Library of Ireland and certainly worthy of visiting. I'm happy to expand on any issues members would like to raise in respect of this programme before proceeding. But if you wish, Chair, I can move on to my heritage section, or whichever you prefer.
We might go with section A first of all.
Sure.
Just maybe allow for a couple of questions, or if anybody wants any advice on it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll ask people then, if we're going to go through it section by section like this, that we'll keep our inputs to 5 minutes, because if we're going to go 10 minutes for every single section, we're going to be here for quite a long period of time. So Dr. Hayden is in there first, but 5 minutes, just yeah.
Okay, and so, sorry, Chair, your plan is to go...
His plan is to go through section A here. Or now, just, if you see, it's actually broken up between a number of different sections, A, B and D, and then C is going to be followed later with obviously the Irish language with An Teachta, An Tara,